Hi, I'm Rob Taylor for PhotoTuts Plus, here with the accompanying video for the Location Lifestyle Shoot article. I'm going to show you how I took this image from its original state you see here to the final version below this video. Here's the PSD in Photoshop. As you can see, there are a fair number of layers. Each of these represents a particular decision in guiding the image towards my final vision, whilst maintaining a physically believable appearance. I haven't imported the original image as a smart object, so let's back out and take a look at the camera raw settings for a second. Quickly do that. Okay, as you can see, white balanced. The tint is slightly more of an artistic decision than a purely technical one. The image wanted to balance at around +6 to +13, somewhere in that region, depending on where it was measured. And I decided to boost it because I liked the way the slight pink tinge appeared in this concrete down here. Other than that, I've boosted the clarity by quite a lot because, as you can see, the sun is flaring into the lens right here, and it made the whole thing a little bit mushy. And you'll notice that I haven't done a lens correction on it like I usually do. This is just to emphasize the wide angle feel of the image and accentuate this geometry going on in the composition. Other than that, that's it. So let's head back and start looking at what I've done going up the layers. First things first, I've cooled it down slightly. You can see there, the whole image has a slightly colder, bluer tinge to it. That was quite simple, it's just a curved layer where I've boosted the blues a little. Next, now that the greys are a little bit blue, this orange flare right here from where the sun was coming in stands out quite prominently. So I took a blue brush over that. Let's zoom in so you can see properly here. I've maintained the flare, I've just turned it blue. That was simply done with a reasonably light, not overly saturated blue brush, and I turned the layer blending mode to hue so that it maintained the lighting of the original image but just turned the color colder. Let's back out so we can see what's next. Next I darkened the foreground because it's still, I'm looking for a gritty, darker feel to this whole image, so I wanted to bring particularly this concrete right here down to this soft graduation. You can see a sort of soft contrast found in large format black and white images. I just liked that aesthetic. That was simply done by, if I move that and boost this, then it's just a very high contrast version of the original image, which has darkened the bit that I wanted to be darkened, and then I masked out some of the areas that I didn't want too dark. I wanted to maintain the shadow detail in this area up here. Obviously I didn't want the actual subject to fall into shadow, and it allowed me to play with the exact graduation going on in the concrete. Next obvious thing, this big distracting tree up here. So I removed that. There we go. Okay, remove the tree. This now gives us a nice white blank canvas to put in a replacement sky. Now most of the rest of the image decisions revolve around making the sky fit in with the image itself. As you can see right now, it stands out quite a lot based on the lighting on the rest of the subject and foreground. So I boosted the contrast. This made it fit more in with these railings here and this concrete going around here. While the source of light should be coming from the sky, there are also deep enough shadows going on that I didn't want the whole thing to be too bright. However, there does still need to be a light source for all this hard edge light going on all over this foreground. So to fix that, I simply added a light in the sky. This was just a very bright curves layer, which I masked in with a nice big soft brush, specifically in this region here, so it could wrap around the various pieces of geometry and create a believable source for these edge lights here. Now, fitting the sky in as it is with the rest of the image, obviously there needs to be a reflection, so I flipped the sky image and put it down in the water, just like that. Masked the whole thing out except for between these bars. Getting the water up precisely against the bars I just did by using a fairly small brush, around 3 or 4 pixels, and just click shift click to create the straight lines against the foreground. I darkened that water down because it shouldn't be brighter than the sky it's been reflected from, obviously. So that was quite simple. Now we get on to the more complex part, which is the main dodge and burn of the overall image to create the final aesthetic. So first I went with burning on this darken layer. Create a lot of soft contrast, bring in a mild vignette around the outside, make these trees and various foliage in the background recede a little by darkening them down, and making the actual clothing pop, because after all, as a sports lifestyle image, this is mainly about the product on show. So I wanted all the ripples to stand out and really draw attention to the main subject. Next comes the dodge layer. Here it's called lighten, and that is just masking in some slightly lighter parts where I felt the need to be, again increasing the contrast in the clothing by brightening up the already slightly lighter parts, and generally going over the natural falling of light from the speed light I had just over here, coming in through an umbrella in this direction. I brightened up his face because it was getting a little bit lost in that hood, and I went over some of these wisps of lighter cloud, just boosting the contrast in the sky that little bit more, making it more dramatic. Next was a sharpening layer. Just bring out some of these textures all over here in the foreground and up above, like that. Quite simple. I masked out all of the foliage, further receding it into the background. Defocused foliage doesn't tend to look so good when it's sharpened anyway, so I usually masked that out. Now there are just 2 layers left. The image is almost complete. It's very close to my original vision. I did a split tone. You can see right there the lighter parts on the ground and in the sky become slightly more yellowish, and everything else is cooled down a lot to replicate the sort of Hollywood look, as it were. This was quite simple. All I did was boost the blues right here in the shadows and drop them down a little in the highlights, and then added a little red and green, which together made yellow, into the highlights. I didn't bother with a gradient map layer which can be used to achieve the same effect, because I just feel like the curves layer gives me a little more control over exactly where the thresholds fall for different tonalities. And finally, I feel like somehow the model here is just looking too cut out from the background. I don't want him to look like he was just pasted in over the top, so adding some atmospherics in, like this, which can further mask out that foliage and bring in a sense of depth behind him and to the sky. It also wraps around him a little in a few places, not too much, but it just allows a slightly more believable sense of that light coming in behind him. And that's it. From interesting composition, but fairly boringly lit initial image, to a final moody and dramatic, larger than life final image. And that's it. I'll leave you with the rest of the article now. Thanks for watching.